I call this regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Roll call, Calvert,
Here.
Hofstra,
Here.
Jackson, Case,
Here.
Ludke,
Here.
Orlowski,
Here.
Romano, Schlinsky.
Here.
I too am present. With that, we have quorum. So the first item of business this evening would be the approval of minutes. And so if there's a motion to approve the minutes of June 9th, 2022,
I'm still moved.
Second.
a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the motion? Any questions or comments on the amendments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Before we get started, I'll run through the public hearing process really quickly. So the way that will work is we'll start with staff input and then move to presentation of the petitioner. If you have anything that you want to say on your behalf, that would be the time where you would speak. And then public participation and questions. So if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on that item, they'd be given about 3 minutes each to do so. And then we will ask any questions we have. And then the petitioner will be given a final opportunity to make any closing comments they want. And then we'll discuss up here and have a motion at the end of the hearing. And so then I guess I would ask that anybody who expects to speak on any agenda item this evening to stand up now. And I will swear you in real quickly. Just raise your right hand if you're going to speak at all. If you're the applicant or a representative of the applicant, I would recommend being sworn in. I need you, real quick. Stand, please. Yeah. No, real quick. Do you swear that the testimony you will give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Thank you. You can be seated. So the first item is petition PZ 220011. 224 West Stone, VL Auto Body, special use for vehicle body and paint finishing, Victor E. Rodriguez and Victor and Luis Auto Body, DBA VL Auto Body, Inc., on behalf of Fred Blumenhagen of FNJ Properties, the owner. When you're ready, Ellen?
I am. Good evening.
Evening.
So the applicant is operating an auto body shop on Stone Road. He is the easternmost building along the railroad. And per Article 6, Section 6.1.3, a special use is required for an auto body paint booth finishing shop. And I will... An auto body what finishing shop? I'll say vehicle body and paint finishing shop. I've got the site located here. You can see they are up against the railroad track. That is Michigan coming to the south where it hits Ridge. The zoning is M1. They are surrounded by M1. The entire property is 0.71 acres. They are one of 6 tenants in the building. Here's a photo of the building. And this is one of the buildings in the village. You can see the right-of-way line in the red and green. And so half of the cars parking in front of the building are actually on right-of-way, and the front row is up against the building on the private subject property. The intent of a special use is to provide a transparent public review process for uses that, because of their design and operational characteristics, should be required case by case to determine if they're compatible with the surrounding uses and the development patterns in the area. So in reviewing the special use for paint booth requests, these were the factors that the development team felt we should consider each for. So we've come up with this set that we will apply consistently moving forward with any type of requests like this. Does the proposed paint booth operation protect the health of the workers in this and the neighboring businesses? Does it protect the environment? What is the business model? We ask that so that we can get all appropriate state licenses, if they're just doing a little bit of auto body, if it's all auto body, if they're selling cars, if they're rebuilding cars. Do they have the proper state licenses? And will parking and storage of the cars being worked on impact the neighborhood? This is the interior of the building. Mr. Rodriguez operates just with himself as an employee, and he's got one paint booth within the building. You can see he has plenty of room to move around and no established auto service bays.
No,
Established auto service bays.
thanks. I liked being closer to you, but
Yeah.
this way I'm facing you, so.
I don't know if it's possible to turn the speakers up in the room too. That might help.
I'm short. I'll move this down. Is that better? Okay. Of the review factors, the parking and storage of cars remains the number one consideration in reviewing these, in the opinion of all the development team, because the other items are handled under other mechanisms. The paint booth has to submit and pass the requirements for the building permit, and the fire department reviews, as well as Danita Anderson, our building official. The environmental protection comes through an RPZ valve, which will not allow anything in the water system to backwash into the public system. That's a requirement in the building, as is a triple basin. So again, the building code is protecting the operation here, and then through the business model, we ask for the state licenses. So it's the zoning question of parking requirements and how is the business operating that is the greatest concern in this type of operation, and actually in the type of any auto repair operation. So it's a 3,800 square foot unit. There's a 400 square foot office. There's one paint booth bay at 325 square feet. The remainder is in open space. There's one overhead door, and Mr. Rodriguez reports he is the only employee. So when I calculated the parking, I had the one parking space for the paint booth. I assumed the 4 repair bays just because the special use would run with the land, and future tenants could choose to put service bays in there, and that's the maximum that would really fit within the building. And then the code requires a half a space per employee, which seems strange because one employee has one car. But I rounded up, and we've got 10 spaces. This property does have 55 linear feet plus 9 feet to the east in front of what is the detention pond at the east side of the building. So there is the potential to accommodate 10 cars in front. And here's a picture. You can see he's at 224, which is between the blue truck and the red car there. That's the door. And there is room to put the 5 across. So in considering the special use, the criteria places the burden of proof on the applicant to show that they comply, and no special use can be recommended or approved unless the decision-making body, that being you and the village board, determine it's consistent with and in substantial compliance with the village policies. These are the findings of fact that were drafted based on the application received. That yes, it is expressly authorized as a special use. It is a necessity business. It does contribute to public convenience and helps the community. The business does cater to the local community and are known. Mr. Rodriguez has been in business for 40 years and relocated here from a neighboring community. And it does meet the vision for Stone Road as identified in the comprehensive plan. The building permit process will confirm that the operation won't be detrimental to health, safety, and moral welfare of persons residing or working in the area. It will not impede normal and orderly growth because the area is already built out, the utilities are in place, and if the business ensures that all the vehicles associated with the operations, repair, employees, and visitors remain off the roadway, there would be sufficient off-street parking available on site without impact to the surrounding properties. In terms of adequate utilities, roads, they do exist. Parking is limited on Stone Road, but with the 55 linear frontage, the vehicle, the business has sufficient parking to meet current parking code. And in the conditions, we've noted that cars must be placed on the subject property without encroaching onto the public right-of-way. The last one is that the special use complies with the applicable regulations of the zoning ordinance. And the answer there is the paint booth will not be installed without approved building and fire permits, which conform to the village code. I will note that the paint booth did go in without a building permit, and Mr. Rodriguez is aware that he's going to be submitting the permits and everything will be to code. So if you would agree, here's a recommended motion for you. I don't know if you have any questions for me before we would get into that.
Okay. All right. So did the petitioner have anything they want to say before we move to questions, or are you the petitioner on this one? Yes. Okay. If you want to speak, I'd need you to come up to the mic, and then state your name and your address for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Victor Rodriguez, 224 West Stone Road.
West Stone Road.
Correct. VNL Auto Body. And actually, that's what I'm here for. I want to, keep going with the business. I moved from Addison, and I'm more than willing to keep going with whatever village asks me. Spray boot is working. My spray boot has been installed.
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
If you just slow down and speak as clear as you can.
For sure. My spray boot has been installed for almost 3 years. So
My spray.
Spray booth?
my spray boot, my equipment for paint cars has been installed for 3 years. So I'm willing to go whatever the village is going to ask me to get my permit to keep going in my business.
Okay. Just wait there, because somebody may have questions.
Sure.
Is there anyone wishing to speak from the public on this agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, then questions from the commission, either for the applicant or for staff?
Not a question per se, it's more a comment for clarification. The business owner's true entity name is Victor and Louis Auto Body.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to make sure that's clarified for the petition itself. And I don't see a registered DBA through the Secretary of State. You found the DBA?
Did you say I found it?
I don't see it on CyberDrive, so.
I found on the Secretary of State's website the business. That was how I knew that it was Victor and Louise Auto Body. I had found it in good standing.
Oh, no, it is in good standing. There's no debate there.
So how long have you been at the site?
In Addison and
Yeah.
Villa Park,
Yeah.
3 years.
3 years,
It's going to
okay.
be 3 years, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you did say that. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I have some questions for staff.
Go ahead.
Do we know currently if there's any violations that were written for that address and if they're still,
There are violations on other units in the building in terms of the water meter. Some water meters had been removed, and that was actually how we became aware that Mr. Rodriguez had the spray booth. We have been doing a lot of work in the Stone Road area, and an inspection team went out and went through the entire building looking for triple basins, RPZs, water meters, and spray booths. They actually went up and down the whole street earlier in the year. So. We also have had a meeting. We invited all of the property owners. The business owners were not invited and did not attend, but we held a meeting in this room with almost every property owner on Stone Road and walked them through requirements for certificate of occupancies, the zoning code, the uses, and told them that we expected that they understand the code, and when leasing, consider the requirements. So I think we've seen some good improvements in Stone Road, and we're still working on things. One of the biggest elements was that cars not be parked 3 deep in front of the buildings. The police department, for example, has started ticketing. We still have a dumpster that needs to be removed off the right-of-way. We've seen a lot of cleanup on the buildings, and we continue to, it's a priority this year to work on it.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in that area, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish the overflow from business to business and vehicles with no registrations, and you don't know, it's a little messy.
The good news is that we've been working with an interdepartmental team, the fire department, the police department, the code enforcement team. They're all at the table together with Public Works and the administration. So,
Okay.
the village manager's office.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one?
No.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move to discussion. Are you anything you want to say before you sit?
No.
Okay, thank you for coming, and we'll
Thank you.
discuss up here. So, any,
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify?
Yes.
So we have the application for special use, and we decided we would let the zoning go through before the other elements were completed, but before the business would receive the correct certificate of occupancy, the building needs a triple basin, it needs an RPZ, and it's going to need inspection by the fire and building department that the paint booth is in conformance.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
Quick question, did you say the building needs that? Is there just a single service for the water service and the sanitary with the?
This
civil business?
unit-
Each individual unit have their own?
Each individual unit
Okay,
has
so
their
this
own.
particular one does not?
Correct. And I've informed the property owner as well that he's going to need a triple basin in the RPZ.
For this unit?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion? One thing I'd say generally is that, I mean, we know there were problems in this area, not just with this unit, this building, or specifically with this unit. But that came up when the use on Addison came before us for the assembly use. And I do want to thank both, I should say, all the community, the village departments that have got together, because there were almost immediate improvements up there. I know that started towards some of the stuff that was started by probably Consuelo and others, but I know Ellen and others have worked hard to get there. But I would like to thank applicants too that are taking this seriously. That could be just, we've had applicants before us who basically said, well, you're going to have to make me do it. And we have somebody here tonight who appears to want to do it right. So that's the only thoughts I have on it. And unless there's additional discussion, then
Now, kudos to staff for organizing a landlord-owner meeting to discuss the ongoing issues in that general area. I think that was a very smart, pragmatic move on your part.
all right, so any other discussion? Then so somebody could make a motion. I think it's in the packet. There are conditions though on the second page.
I can get this. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of PZ 22011 for the following requests. A special use identified in the village zoning ordinance under Article 6, Section 6.1.3 in the M1 Light Industrial District for a vehicle body and paint finishing shop pursuant to the procedures set forth in Article 11, Section 11.4 of the village zoning ordinance with the following conditions. 1, compliance with all applicable village codes and regulations. 2, business owner will obtain all necessary permits and certifications for development, including building, spray paint booth, and sign permits, and a certificate of occupancy. 3, installation of triple basin and RPZ valve. 4, all parking related to the business will be on the subject property, not within the road, and will comply.
Not within the road?
Correct. And will comply with all rules and regulations imposed by the village regulating parking in the parkway. 5, property will be maintained in such a manner as to not create a public nuisance as defined in the Property Maintenance Code. 6, fire lanes will be approved by the chief of the fire department and maintained by the business owner. For the property located at 224 West Stone, pin 0604212016, with a finding of fact that such special uses meet the standards enumerated in Article 11.2 and 11.4 of Appendix C of the Municipal Code, Village of Villa Park, Basic Zoning Ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call vote. Calvert,
Yes.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Orlowski,
No.
Shalinski.
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation will pass to the village board. They have the final say in the matter. They can accept, reject, or modify our recommendation. And good luck. Thank you for coming. Alright, so the next item of business would be petition PZ 220007, 225 West Stone, Let's Go Motors, special use for vehicle body and paint finishing shop. Ricario Ramos of Let's Go Motors, DBA G's and Z's Motors applicant on behalf of Chicago Title 800237475 the owner. Whenever you're ready, Ellen.
Good evening. This is an application for special use for vehicle body and paint finishing shop in the M1 district. And it's very similar to the case we just heard this evening, so I will repeat some of my items so that the case stands alone on its record for posterity. So the applicant has applied for a special use to operate a paint booth within their business on Stone Road at 225 Stone Road, pursuant to Article 11 of the zoning ordinance. The site is zoned M1 light manufacturing, and there is manufacturing in all four directions. There is homes immediately south of Ridge, but there is another building between this property and the homes to the south. And we originally had published this for a May hearing, and I found an error in the legal notice, so we republished. And upon the recommendation of the village attorney, the second publication was for the entire building. So there's 2 pins here. And we did a full mailing, and we put a sign out as well. Here's the property in question. It's a 3-tenant building on the east side of Stone Road, on the south side of the building. We do have concerns with parking, as you can see illustrated in the photos here. So the intent of a special use is to provide a transparent public review process for uses that on a case-by-case basis need to be reviewed to determine if they're compatible with the surrounding uses and development patterns in the neighborhood. And the development staff has come up with these 4 factors to consider as it would relate to auto body operations. The first one, does the proposed paint booth protect the health of the workers in this and the neighboring businesses? And this question gets answered via the permit process, with the building and fire department reviewing permits for the operation. The second is, does the proposed paint booth protect the environment? This also gets answered during the building process, the building permit process, because we look for a triple basin and an RPZ valve to ensure that nothing gets into the water supply. The third is, what is the business model? We look for all appropriate state licenses. A paint booth operation can be attached to different kinds of businesses, auto dealers, auto repair, or just paint and body on its own. And we look to see that everyone's current with the state and that sales taxes being paid in a business such as this, where their main model is to be an auto dealer. They are an internet auto dealer. They're advertising on the internet. And then the fourth question is, does the parking and storage of cars impact the neighborhood? This remains our main question on this and all auto-related businesses in the village, because we've seen the cars spilling out in the neighborhood. This particular business is a 3,500 square foot internet sales auto dealership. They would like to put one paint booth in the rear. They have one overhead door and 3 employees. And in calculating the parking, it appears to require 12 spaces, 1 parking space for the paint booth, 9 for the auto dealer. If you calculate 2.5 spaces per square foot required for each 1,000 square feet of the building. And then per the code, 2 for the 3 employees. It's 0.5 employee and rounding up to 2. The site plan does include 14 spaces on site. I want to note that I had the petitioner size the spaces at 10 by 20 square feet. They specialize in Nissan automobiles, which are smaller. I think they're 6 by 14. They're a much smaller car, but because the special use is transferable and runs with the land, we needed to know how many spaces of a normal size vehicle could fit. So the site plan is for a full-size vehicle. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant. The 4 spaces, I flipped it, so north is to your right, and you can see the 4 spaces perpendicular to the building, parallel to the building, excuse me. That's where Macario Ramos has indicated that they would be parking cars for display, and then there are spaces for other vehicles. The alley to the rear is private. It was vacated several years ago. So in looking at special use, the burden is on the applicant to show the application complies with the review and approval criteria. And you should consider findings of fact. These were put together based on the application submitted by the applicant. The use is expressly authorized as a special use. Vehicle body and paint finishing shop is an activity expressly authorized as a special use in the M1 district. The second consideration is if it's necessary or desirable to provide a service or facility.
Or desirable?
Yeah, necessary or desirable to provide a service or facility in the interest of public convenience. And it is an activity necessary to the maintenance of vehicles. The business is a specialty destination for those specifically seeking the Nissan vehicles, and it does draw customers who may also shop and dine at Villa Park restaurants. The business does meet the vision for Stone Road as identified in the comprehensive plan. And I note that auto sales provide sales tax to a municipality. The third finding that should be considered is that the operation will not be detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity. And as noted, the building permit process will confirm that the paint booth is installed to meet fire department specifications and installed properly. In this building, triple basin and RPZ valves are already installed, and the business will be held to the approved parking plan in order to prevent disruption of the operation of the neighboring businesses. That will be one of the conditions, should the commission recommend approval. The fourth finding is that business does not impede the normal and orderly development of the surrounding property. And this area is built out, and if the business is operated in accordance with the site plan, there should be sufficient off-street parking available, which would not impact surrounding properties. The fifth finding relates to adequate utilities, roads, parking. And again, parking is limited on Stone Road, therefore we've asked for a site plan indicating where vehicles will be parked. The site plan places 14 vehicles on the property, able to be placed there without encroaching onto the public right-of-way. And then the last finding would be related to the fact that a special use should comply with all applicable regulations of the zoning ordinance. And we've noted the paint booth would not be installed without an approved building and fire permit conforming to zoning, fire, and building code requirements.
Zoning, say that one more time, zoning and what?
Zo-
Fire code?
Zoning, building, and fire codes. So that's what I have for you. If you've got questions, before we would get to a recommended motion. Lisandro Felix is here. He's a partner with Macario Ramos in the business. And I will note that, well, I'll let Jason bring this up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just a clarification is,
Real quick, just let the record show that Commissioner Jackson arrived at 8:02. Yeah, go ahead.
okay. Just a quick clarification for the name of the petitioner record. The full name should be Let's Go Motorsports LLC.
No, just Motors. Let's go Motors.
Let's Go Motors is involuntarily dissolved. I do have a Let's Go Motorsports LLC that's active at 225 West Stone. Okay.
Hang on real quick. So, I'm gonna need you to speak up, and could you also state your name and address for the record? You can come up here, and then let's,
Lisandro Felix,
Say it again,
Lisandro, L-I-Z-A-N-D-R-O, Felix, for 225 Stone.
F-E-L-A-X?
F-E-L-A-X, yes.
Uh-huh.
Stone Road, 225 Stone Road. Yeah.
Great. So what I was getting to is that when I was searching for Let's Go Motors, I found that earlier this year it was involuntarily
Oh, yes.
dissolved.
And then they went into the LLC, yes.
So
You have to talk one at a time.
Oh, sorry.
Okay?
Sorry.
And then what was your answer when you said it was
Yes,
involuntary
yes,
dissolved?
it was.
okay. So I believe the clarification for the record should be that the petitioner's full name is Let's Go Motorsports LLC, DBA G's and Z's Motorsport LLC.
Correct.
Okay. And for the spelling, Let's Go Motorsports and also G's and Z's, those are without any apostrophes.
Without any?
Without any.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
yeah, and if you just want to wait, we may have more questions. Or actually, this would be a point if you want to say anything on your behalf.
No, I mean,
Okay.
we just, we try to comply with everything. So we're just trying to move along with Ellen and all that and whatever we need to do, you know, just to keep moving things forward.
All right. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, I see none. So, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I did include in the report, we did receive 3 calls on this application with concern over parking on the street and cars traveling at high speed.
Yeah, and a few, just so for the record, a few residents have come up to us and asked us if we knew these people that are driving around. But it's being almost a common thing now. It's almost like almost every other day we see somebody speeding, going through 225, making that turn, and then going into the residential. None of them are related with us. You know what I mean? We don't do that type of thing in our neighborhood. So you just want to make sure that we clarify that's not us. So, but we are keeping an eye on it. So.
Okay, so, I have a question for Ellen. So you said that the alley to the south is vacated? Even though
Correct.
it's not shown that way on the survey?
It's correct, it's a
Okay.
private alley. I put the ordinance number in the actual staff report, so.
Okay, and then,
Can you show us that picture again?
The site plan? Or,
The area, that one there. So their property is the last one there with all of the cars parked around the building. Is that correct?
correct, the whole building is auto repair. There's 2 other tenants to the left. The center building is auto, and then the western tenant is a trailer repair.
And parking is permissible, the front and the rear of the building?
The rear is an alleyway, so it's private property. Yes, they can park there.
Uh-huh.
And in front, it's a similar situation as we have across the street and over on Addison. The red and green line indicates the subject property boundary. And so one row of cars would be parked on the subject property and one row is actually in the parkway.
And when was this picture taken?
I think this is a 2018 Google aerial.
Yeah, and then just kind of by point of clarification on this, this is from the, I'm guessing the DePage County GIS probably.
You're right, it is
So-
not Google, it's the county
Yeah,
GIS.
The blue dotted line, you can actually see where the old alley was. You see the red line that cuts across the south property line, but then you could see the blue dotted line on either side of it. So that alley was cut in half and split between the properties on the north and the south.
So there, it's not through traffic on the alley at all?
The public traverses through there, and that's a good point, Mr. Chairman. My red rectangle should have come down to that blue line.
No, it's in the right place.
spot.
It's in
Okay.
the right place. The blue line that's a little bit north of that is
Oh,
actually the
okay.
old property line.
It's actually the what?
Old property line.
Scratch my record, my comment, Lynn. The red rectangle is correct.
But I was trying to figure out, looking at the old survey, exactly where we were looking at parking spaces in the rear and the front. Okay. All right, so anyone else have questions?
What's the square footage of this building?
The unit is 3,400 square feet. The building itself,
Not just this unit.
yeah, 3,400. And this unit does comprise half of the building.
I have a question for the petitioner. Mr. Felix, correct? Okay. I see that there's a Mr. Ramos who is the agent and a manager of the business that you have located at 225 West Stone. He has an address though of 226 West Stone, meaning the building we just talked about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He owns the a gym on the other across the way. He has a gym on the other side.
A gym
Marshall.
is located at the 226
Yeah, on the
West
across the
Stone?
street. Yeah, next to Victor,
Okay.
the guy that was just here.
226 is not auto body related at all?
No. No.
Okay.
No.
It's right up here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify if it was also an auto body.
Yeah. No. It's
Business.
it's a MMA gym.
All right.
There's a detailing shop to the west of the gym, Excalibur, which is different ownership. But then you've got Excalibur and then the gym and then Mr. Rodriguez with LV Auto.
Thank you.
Or VL.
The use immediately to the west in your building, Mr. Felix, that appears to be auto-related. Is it sales? Is it auto body? Do you know what it
They're
is?
pretty much all auto repair.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you got the trailer guy at the very end, and he works in nothing but trailers. That's all they do.
Is this really an appropriate site for car sales?
It's common for some of these internet dealers, the small dealers, to be in a manufacturing area. It is a permitted use. And they're advertising on the internet that they don't need the visibility that you get on a North Avenue or a Roosevelt Road. I've seen it more and more common in the last 10 years.
To that point, though, the storage requirement for cars on a site is never referenced. I mean, the whole idea of parking 2.5 cars per 1,000 square feet for an auto sales doesn't jive with sort of, selling cars, right? I mean, there's volume. Do you have cars off-site?
We do not outside. No, everything is where we have it.
Everything that you deal with
Everything
is
that we do
on-site?
is there. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and we're like G's and Z's is pretty much specialized to two vehicles, pretty much. So but it's all Nissan Infiniti line. So, and of course, there's a lot of following for these type of vehicles. So that's why most of our sales are pretty much through internet. So that's pretty much where where we're at with. We don't really need to be up on North Avenue to advertise.
If I may, you want to talk about your business model, you try and do a certain number per month, you buy them at auction?
Yeah, it's pretty much just what we do, auction. Most of the cars come from out of state, so, like to look, we live in Chicago, so everything here is rusty. So, so we look for everything out of state. That's what we do, so. And then, we bring them in, offer them to the people here in Illinois, which is a big following,
So you guys are essentially just flipping cars,
pretty much, yeah.
and you're not gonna have a huge inventory, right?
No. Everything pretty much goes, like, if we have, let's say we have 3 or 4 coming in 1 month, pretty much, almost all of them are already sold, pretty much, by the time they get to here, so.
So it's not like you're gonna have they're not gonna have a standing lot of like 10
No,
cars, guys.
no, it's
They're
just- it's
flipping
always-
them, and they've got out-of-town buyers,
Yep.
and you're specifically looking at high-end cars too, right?
Yeah. So Mercedes, stuff like that, but mostly right now we're sticking to the Infiniti and Nissan line right now at the moment. So it's what we're most comfortable with at the moment. So
Ellen, when you did a site visit, how many cars were outside when you visited?
It's varied. I don't have my notes with me on that. I will say that there are more than are on the site plan, have been there at any one time that we've been there. But that's one of the purposes of the special use, is to try and control the externalities. And if there's a problem and the cars are encroaching into the right of way, it can be, this ordinance for special use could be enforced. So when village staff is working as a team with all the departments represented at the table to consider some of the concerns with Stone Road based on complaints we had at the end of 2021. And one of the things we did was we held a meeting with all of the property owners. I'm going to repeat myself for the purpose of this record. And we talked with all the property owners and walked them through code requirements and indicated what we would be enforcing, and let them know that we expect them to be reviewing tenants for zoning code, building code, and fire code requirements, because we've had significant concerns with cars parked 3 deep on Stone Road. And there's a lot, there's many auto repair related uses now on Stone Road. The area, it's an attractive area for such, because most of the buildings have triple basins in place. And when the street was first built, I think it was generally small manufacturing or office or contractor type businesses. It wasn't this auto intensive. We did let the property owners know that going forward, if we feel that a use that comes in for certificate of occupancy just can't be parked, we're going to deny the zoning based on the ability to park. But what we're doing now is we're working with tenants that are already there to try and get them compliant. And as for Commissioner Lutke's comment regarding the parking code, that's why I put the entire section in your memo. It is what it is, whether we feel it's sufficient or not. That's what we have to rely on right now. Did I answer your question?
Pretty much. I mean, I've driven through there, and it's difficult. You don't know what car belongs to what business, and they're parked all over the place, Not just on Stone, but on side streets and, median. But you can't really identify what car belongs to what business.
I mean, obviously, a part of that is enforcement in the past. I'm not saying currently, but and some of it, like the stuff along Addison, that was there when that applicant came before us. I mean, that was right out in the open. That wasn't even tucked away on Stone Road.
No.
I drove by there a bunch of times, and at some point you stop thinking about the fact that there are cars parked too deep, but we shouldn't. Okay.
Cars parked
Too
too deep,
deep.
number or TOO?
2 TWO, the number.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, one of the things we referenced to the property owners when we met with them, if you look through the municipal code, the North Avenue Industrial Park area, which is the flip triangle of this from the railroad up to North Avenue, and then Home Road, have specific parkway regulations in place. And we may go to that here, where every property owner is going to have a license to use the parkway in front of their building. And so that'll be another mechanism to control parking. But for right now, we're just going case by case with what was noticed when the inspection team went building to building.
Okay.
And just to clarify, both of these applicants are before us tonight because of violations you found,
Correct,
not because they came here on their own accordance.
correct. Yes,
They got busted.
we found cars being painted here without the paint booth. So, and then a building permit was submitted immediately, but we need the special use variance in place first. And so the development team decided we would let the applicants go through the zoning process first before going through the expense of any other requirements, including stamp drawings for a paint booth. Because it's a commercial building permit, it has to be architecturally stamped.
Did I hear you correctly earlier that vehicular sales for this building is already a permitted use?
Correct.
Okay, so then, as the petitioner's main business model itself is the
Changing.
sale of, please sir, the sale of vehicles, is it a fair interpretation or fair comment that the painting, the reason that we're here for the special use is more of an ancillary use to the primary function of your business as auto sales?
Yeah, it's just like an add-on, because, you know, obviously we're getting more involved with them and stuff like that. So that's why we're trying to get everything situated so we can do that. Be able to, you know, accommodate everything pretty much.
Because as you take the cars at auction,
Yes.
you need to repair
them,
and paint.
yeah. It's getting to the point where, you know, some of them, you know, of course you can swap parts and stuff like that, but some of them, you know, they have to be painted. So we want to be able to, instead of sourcing that out all the time, so we figure, well, you know, why don't we just do this in-house, keep it all together. Customers like it that way, they trust us with the car and everything else, so that's why we're here, so.
And to follow up with your question, what we've also done is we've looked at a list of all known paint booths in the village so that we can go back and check on them, that they all meet the life safety requirements. Many of them were installed prior to 2018, and it's the 28 ordinance that created this as a special use. I believe it was a permitted use before in an M1 district, and it was transformed into a special use with the last code to the best of what I can find. So what we're going to do is go back to the older ones that were installed without the special use. They would be grandfathered in, but we're going to have a fire and building inspector go out to confirm that they meet code, that the operations are safe. It's going to be a whole task force of its own.
No, I have a question. If I was to go to your business right now, would I have anywhere to park?
Yeah.
Okay. How long's the bus been there?
The bus?
Yeah.
We just moved it up this morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, any final comments you've got this evening, or?
No, just, you know, we just want, like I said, we're trying to be here for the whole, you know, community, so we want to make sure we comply with everything.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And you can have a seat if you want.
Thank you.
So, yeah, not directly related to this, but related to this, I wonder if we need to, at some point, revisit where we do and don't, and how allow automotive sales. I'm not saying that they necessarily need to be a special use in M districts or whatever, but internet auto sales are rising, and there are a number of communities that now have internet sales, auto sales as a separate use type from auto sales. So you basically have like large lot conceptual used car lots, and then internet auto sales, which have different standards. I believe Skokie does, I think Schomburg does, I'm sure there are others. I've not looked into them in depth. Actually, I have. I've just forgotten everything I looked into when I was working on them. But that may be something worth. But this case even though it's not about the use, the internet auto sales, that may be worth us looking into. Not just where we permit them, but if there are specific ordinances that might limit the potential for negative impact. And then, so I guess what we would be considering is that this use, the auto sales is a permitted use. So we're not really debating that this evening. We're debating whether or not this use should be permitted to have a spray booth associated with that permitted use. Whatever violations might or might not be occurring on the property, obviously, you could consider that in terms of how they might operate their spray booth moving forward, but I mean, it's also a separate issue in its own way. So, any other discussion?
Alan, could you speak about that Parkway, whatever you were talking about on the other side of the tracks, between the tracks and North Avenue, that
Yeah.
how would use the parkways there?
I don't know if I can pull it up online for you. When we go into the code and we search for North Avenue Industrial, it comes up right away. And when a business is using the public right-of-way as a extension of their site, the village requires a license agreement because we're concerned over liability. And so the ordinance for the two areas where it's already in place, up between North Avenue and the tracks, and then on Home Avenue right here, permits the businesses to park this too deep scenario. But it requires a sign off from the businesses that they recognize the liability is theirs and that they will abide by all regulations. Without pulling it up, do you want me to pull that up right now?
No, that clarifies what the intent is.
Yeah.
In these conversations that we've had specifically about these two applications, is that being strongly considered at the staff level and at the?
It is being strongly considered, and the special use process here was viewed as one means to get that compliance on this property at least. We've also talked, the police department has asked, as they write tickets, they'd like to see a clear denotation on where the parking can and can't be. So if you paint a line on the edge of our property, then they know you can't park here. And we've talked about things like that too. So you can see up and down Stone, some of the properties have had the parkway paved over and some don't.
Right.
We'd like to maintain the green wherever we can, but for reasons that predate me, some of these properties were allowed to have it paved.
Yeah, we've seen some paved, some have gravel. The boulevard and have 2 and 3, 4 cars parked there during the day.
We've got some citations out on properties like that right
Yeah.
now.
So do we say that the properties were allowed, or they just did it?
I would have to assume that the paving here was done via permit. I don't know otherwise. But I don't know that that's pertinent to the question here. What's pertinent here is the site plan. And if the applicant is certifying before you through his application that he can keep all his cars on the subject property, then it's referenced as a condition. And so it would be a means to control that element of the operation. It can be challenging to ticket cars that don't have current plates or, expired or no plates at all, especially when you're in an arena where cars are being flipped, because sometimes the title isn't transferred right away. And when you look it up, it shows the original owner because it hasn't been sold yet. And the police department has voiced those concerns. That's why we're glad they're sitting at the table with us, with the Stone Road work team.
All right, any other discussion?
Yeah, me personally, I think that there's too much on the property. It's just, it's not working.
Okay. So, if there's no other discussion, then we need a motion.
Make a motion to recommend approval of PZ 220007 for the following requests. A special use identified in the village zoning ordinance under Article 6, Section 6.1.3 in the M1 Light Industrial District for vehicle body and paint finishing shop pursuant to the procedures set forth in Article 11, Section 11.4 of the village zoning ordinance with the following conditions. 1. Compliance with all applicable village codes and regulations. 2. Business owner will obtain all necessary permits and certifications for development, including building, spray paint booth, and sign permits, and a certificate of occupancy. 3. Installation of triple basin and RPZ valve. 4. All parking related to the business will be on the subject property, not within the road, and will comply with all rules and regulations imposed by the village regulating parking in the parkway. 5. Property will be maintained in such a manner as to not create a public nuisance as defined in the property maintenance code. 6. Fire lanes will be approved by the chief of the fire department and maintained by the business owner. 7. Complete remittance of sales tax to the state of Illinois for the property located at 225 West Stone, pins 0604 210017 and 0604 210018, with a finding of fact that such special uses meet the standards enumerated in Article 11.2 and 11.4 of Appendix C of the Municipal Code, Village of Villa Park Basic Zoning Ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who seconded?
That was Commissioner Jackson. Is there questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call vote. Calvert,
No.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Lutke,
Yes.
Orlowski,
No.
Shalinski.
Yes.
I too vote yes. Our recommendation will pass the village board. They can accept, reject, or modify as they see fit. Good luck. Thank you. All right, so then we've got petition PZ 220006, Village Code Amendments to Zoning Ordinance. Village of Villa Park is the petitioner.
The 2022 project that continues. I have continued to work on it as time has permitted. I've made some progress, but not complete recommendation for you yet. So I'll walk through with what I do have recommendations for, get some feedback on some, and then the remainder, hopefully, we will continue at the next meeting. That's my intent. So just to cover all the bases, the case was properly noticed on April 27th in the newspaper for consideration of Article 2, residential uses, Article 3, office, commercial, and industrial districts, Article 6, uses, and Article 14, measurements and definitions, with the intent of adding regulations, definitions, and clarification, including the permitted locations, height, size, and number of permitted accessory structures per lot. So what we were doing there is capturing all of the elements related to accessory structures for each type of use. We also published for Article 4 MX districts for consideration of, Article 4 MX districts, Article 7 parking, and Article 9 and Article 14 for the purpose of adding regulations, definitions, and clarification on the width of driveways and driveway approaches, landscaping requirements, visibility triangle requirements, and the width for service walks. And then the last thing we published for was to correct Scrivener's errors in the Article 4 MX district section of the code.
Are you saying annexed district?
MX.
M is in Mary, X is in X-ray.
Do you need me to go through that again? Are you okay?
No.
Okay. So on the last meeting, on June 6th, we did have consensus on these changes. Lynn, do you want me to read these, or do you want to just take them off of the screen? But there was consensus already on a section of what we've been considering. I'll just give you the section numbers real quick, if that's okay.
I'd rather you say them than having to, I'd rather write it than have to look it up, so.
Okay. Article 7, parking, section 7.8.4, amending driveway widths. Article 7, parking, section 7.8.5, amending the width of circular driveways and addressing the evergreen shrubs that would be planted. Article 7, parking, 7.8.7, driveway design with the purpose of cross-referencing lot coverage requirements with Table 2-3. Article 7, surfacing, 7.9.4, parking area design, amending the minimum specifications for driveway construction. Section 9.3.1, intersections, amending requirements for visibility triangles. Section 9.1.5.c, landscaping and screening, providing that when a conflict exists, determination will be by the zoning administrator and determined by the, review will be by the zoning administrator and determined by the community development director. And there was also consensus on definitions, Article 14, regarding several definitions. So tonight, I'd like to consider that one chunk, it was attachment 1, it's the Article 4 MX districts. I don't think there's really much discussion regarding the Scrivener errors unless you found additional from what I found. If you did, can you bring those up? But there were just typos, mislabeling of figures. Some of the figures, the figure name was not carried into the code, and I found it on the original draft. Was not carried into the code, and I found it on the original document. So you'd be reading the code and it would reference figure blah, 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 and you couldn't find figure because the caption had been left off. And then similarly, it references MX2A and MX2B, but only speaks of MX2. So I just deleted that. So those are just small Scrivener errors. The substantive recommendation for consideration we talked about at the May meeting, and that would be defining ground floor use in a general building. And then also tonight, I'd like to continue discussion of the accessory structures, the amount and size of each type, and consideration of potentially allowing second garages. But I would come back with a red line on those at a future meeting. Okay. So in the strikeout here, you can see this is how first floor use in a general building is currently, how currently reads in the code. All permitted uses except commercial service, comma, eating and drinking establishments, comma, and retail sales are limited to no more than 50% of gross floor area of the story. And we discussed it a couple times, and the question gets into a general building. These are allowed in several MX districts, and we have to keep in mind that the consideration is not the district, it's the building, because it's a form-based code. And the general building is allowed in the MXT, MXR1, and MXR2. And as you can see, it says all permitted uses. When you look at the uses in the MXR1 and R2, it's almost all residential. there's maybe 3 or 4 other small uses. That was why I put the use table as an attachment in your document. And my first consideration when we spoke was to rewrite it, if we truly wanted mixed use as a transition from the commercial nodes to the residential. When we talked last time, I had suggested moving the clauses around so that it would clearly be horizontally a mixed use. It couldn't be all residential if that was what the commission wanted. And the more I thought about it, I think we might want to break it out by the residential districts and by the MXT. But I'm going to leave this for consideration. The first question is, do you want to allow first floor residential only in an MXT? And this does not take into consideration any cases that have been before you already. This is moving forward. Do we want to see more of a mix on those types of buildings? And the differentiation between the MXT and the MXR1 and 2 is the setback of the building. So if you're going to have residential on the first floor, do you want the building setback greater or not is another element.
Okay. I have a question. Mr. Ross, are you just here to listen on this evening, or do you have input that you'd like to offer at some point?
I would like to speak.
Okay. Okay, on this is the one that you have interest in?
Correct.
Okay, so I think the way we would do this is you've pretty much said what you want to say on that particular portion, right? So then,
Correct.
do you want to come up and state your name and address for the record, and then feel free to take about 3 minutes or so.
Craig Ross, 27 West Park Boulevard. Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to speak against the proposed text amendment to zoning ordinance 4.4.3C14 in regard to the ground story uses of general buildings in the MXT district. I believe the current interpretation of this code is correct and shouldn't be changed. The MXT zoning was not meant to create a district with predominantly retail space. 4.1.2E says, quote, the MXT district is intended to accommodate low to mid-scaled office and/or residential buildings, end quote. Furthermore, general buildings, which are allowed in the MXT district per 4.3.22 states, quote, a general building is limited in terms of uses by the district within which it is located, generally housing office and/or residential uses, end quote. Neither of these sections of the code mention retail, and both mention residential uses. Also, Table 6.1 states that 3 or more households per lot are allowed in MXT, and per 6.9.4, the definition of a multi-unit building is a residential building on a single lot that is occupied by 3 or more dwelling units that share common walls and/or common floors and ceilings, end quote. This is another clue in the zoning ordinance that dwelling units were intended on the ground floor of a general building in MXT. Leslie Oberholzer of Codometrics, the consultant who helped write up the MXT district ordinance, confirmed via email that general buildings were meant to accommodate, quote, meant to accommodate mainly residential and office uses with limited retail service and eating and drinking in the ground story, end quote. Consuelo Arguelles, the former community development director, confirmed with me via an email on November 4th of last year that an apartment building is considered a general building. Requiring 50% or more of retail on the ground story could stifle future development in this district. Commissioner Ludke brought up a great point at a previous meeting that most likely very large lots exist in MXT district, some of which may be narrow, and requiring to have 50% retail or restaurants on the first floor would not be viable. For example, 51 East Park Boulevard, which is on the very east end of the Ardmore Business District, is approximately a 40,000 square foot parcel with 70% impervious allowed. This would allow a 28,000 square foot footprint, of which 14,000 square feet would need to be retail or restaurant if this code is amended. Trying to lease out this much space in this area would prove very difficult to the point that I believe it would prohibit any development of this parcel. Furthermore, if it did get developed to this capacity, it would create a lot of retail traffic and parking issues, as it would be like having a large Trader Joe's in the area or 3 McDonald's. Retail and restaurants require a lot of street parking and bring a lot of traffic, which is not in the best interest of nearby residential neighbors. Yet the MXT zoning districts in many cases are the districts abutting the residential areas. MX2 is the zoning district interior in the MX zoning areas, which require the first floor commercial and where this type of space is appropriate. MXTs are meant to be a transition or a buffer between the MX2 and the surrounding residences. Another example would be my property at,
Excuse me.
sorry.
Can you just slow down just
Sure.
a tiny bit?
Yep.
Sometimes when people read, they
I-
go quite fast.
I won't rush you.
I was worried about my 3 minutes.
I won't rush you too much.
I'm almost done. Another example is my property at 27 West Park Boulevard. 50% commercial on my first floor would prohibit the parking garage, since according to village staff, the parking garage is an accessory to the residential component of the building and therefore cannot be used towards the 50% retail requirement. This would eliminate the parking garage completely, since it couldn't be done in the space left over after the 50% retail or restaurant, and therefore render the project impossible. The action that needs to be taken is to correct the zoning of MXT on St. Charles Road by changing it to MX2 or some more appropriate zoning, so that residential on the first floor is not allowed via a general building or a row building. Again, even with the text amendment to the general buildings in MXT, row houses would still be allowed in this district. And you can imagine how out of place row houses would look on St. Charles Road. If the Planning and Zoning Commission still thinks retail should be on the first floor in the MXT district, I would ask that you consider lowering the required percentage to something like 20%, or just requiring the primary street-facing first floor for the first 20 feet or so to be required to be commercial. Thanks for your time. I do have, I'll give you what I said, and then also I have the 2 emails, one from Consuelo and one from Leslie, that you can look at too.
What are those names? Consuelo and Leslie what?
Leslie Oberholzer, as it sounds, and Consuelo Arguilles, Arguilles.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this from the public? Okay. Seeing
Mr.
none?
Chairman, if I may?
Yes, please continue.
I want to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm not recommending that it become all commercial. If you notice, it says, except commercial service, eating and drinking establishments and retail. So that does differentiate between office and higher intensity commercial uses, which would be restaurants. I did run this by the village attorney, who frankly agreed with my interpretation as I've modified it here, that's how she read the intent of the original statement. So I think it just gets down to, how does the commission want to interpret it, and what do we do going forward? And the question becomes, what do you want the first floor to look like in an MXT district? So, I no disrespect to Mr. Ross, he's thought about this thoroughly, and he brings up good points. It gets down to these transitional, at one point I was even thinking, do we need MXT? Does MX3 solve what we want to do? That's the depth at which I've been thinking about this, so.
Yes, so, and I understand with the original text, you asked me early on, when we were considering some MX projects, how do you interpret this sentence? And when I read it, I interpreted it the same way as you did, because I'm a fan of the comma, the Oxford comma, all the commas. And when you read it as, in that way, I think your interpretation was technically correct. Whether or not that's the intent is another question, and that's something that, one way or the other, we should clarify.
Let me just jump in real quick. And that's why I think you have to look at, you can't just look at the sentence, you have to look at the context of
Right.
everything else and all the other clues that we're getting. And again, the person who basically wrote the code telling us what it really means.
Right.
Comma or no comma?
So then I guess, the question, there's a lot of questions here. In one tiny little sentence. And some of them are related to this, some of them are related to the MXT, maybe where we have MXT zoning, and like you said, and I know Mr. Ross said, and I've wondered the same thing, are there places where the MXT isn't appropriate? The MXT is obviously intended to be transitional, so in locations like towards the end of Park, both ends of Park, where we do have MXT, I can understand why some or all of that being residential is a type of transition, where if you have a building type that's less intense uses in the ground floor, that's potentially less burdensome on single-family residences or even small multi-family residence neighbors that are across the street or adjacent to or behind. On the other hand, transition should probably also give some sort of nod to the districts that it's transitioning away from, not just what it's transitioning to. So that's where I'm on the fence on that one. I mean, I don't think a ground floor needs to be 100% not residential necessarily.
And I was not saying that.
No, right. And I certainly understand Mr. Ross's concerns, not just as it relates to his property, but as it relates general, and all the points that he raises are completely valid. And that's what makes transitions tricky, because try as you may, you're not always transitioning between the same uses or the same intensity of uses. In the case of 27 West Park, you are transitioning from relatively low intensity commercial retail use to basically our lowest intensity of single family uses. On St. Charles, that's a completely different thing.
And if I may, I think the introduction of the MXT on St. Charles envisioned a total transformation of the street,
Yeah.
so that it would be brand-new buildings with residential above and commercial on the first floor.
Right, and I'm trying to remember that specifically, because there were not, I mean, I'm sure there are minutes somewhere of those, of the steering committee meetings, public hearing. They were technically public hearings, but nobody ever came out for them. And I know Director Grill at the time did take some notes.
Who did?
Director Grill, Grill. And one of the things that I remember specifically, though I don't know why we landed on MXT, was that we looked at that stretch of St. Charles, and I know that it was all pretty homogeneously zoned. And through discussion and comparing to the comprehensive plan, there was this desire to create these nodes that would be, to have the aspects of corner buildings and things like that. And maybe that Leslie crafted most of that, the MXT and their application, and it may be that there's a better designation for that along St. Charles than the MXT. But I think that's why they are where they are.
And the commission may choose that the MXT mixed-use component is vertical. You know, that you just want to know that there is some separation between first floor and upper floors, or do you want to consider the horizontal? Because I can see on St. Charles, if you're creating those nodes, the purpose may be to not have commercial along the entire length and to have just a pure residential building. But in which case, why didn't we just do MXR? See, that's where I was getting into, do we even need MXT? I really thought about that.
Excuse me. Nodes?
Node, N-O-D-E.
Yeah.
A cluster of buildings.
I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what word you were saying, so.
Should I look for the minutes before we continue this discussion? Will that help us at all?
I don't know how much it would help. I'm gonna guess that they're general minutes, because there were no transcripts like this
Okay.
taken. And I know Director Grill took minutes.
The other thing
But-
to think about is the storefront building is clearly first floor retail only. And that's why in your memo on the top of page 3, I did put where each building is permitted. I thought that might help you think it through as well. And the MXT clearly does not allow a storefront building. It is not to have first floor only. And the MXR1, to differentiate, is around the train station only. MXR2 is other residential in the MX districts. This is good conversation. We're getting into what it really means to have this form-based code,
Yeah.
which again is looking more at how the building itself relates to the street than the uses relating to its neighboring uses.
Yeah, and that's where I appreciate, the project Mr. Ross brought before us, even though it's ultimately a planned development, the project, the Union, and then the project on St. Charles, because they've forced us to look at these MX districts in a way that we've never been asked to look at them before. They've just existed in the code, and so the good and the not so clear are becoming obvious. Yeah, so I really think like this MXT, we need to really kind of look in depth at like where we have it. I know it's fairly limited, but it's in some high visibility areas.
Why don't we table this till the next one, and I'll bring back a map?
Because this can be a separate workshop.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this. After listening to all of this and reading and going down a rabbit hole like we're doing here, and thinking about what we want that MXT first floor spaces, zones to look like, and understanding them contextually by looking at the zoning map where these things occur, it seems to me that you could easily adjust the language for what happens at the ground story to just say that all permitted uses, because you go to the use table, tells you what are the permitted uses. So we've already established what those are. Say that all of them can be limited to no more than 50%. Like, if we want to have a mix, go ahead and have a mix, right? If you have a couple of apartments or a couple of residential units and you happen to have a retail slot or a food establishment of some sort, great. Along St. Charles Road, that's a possible, especially as you start to wrap these, as you turn corners onto these side streets, you might not want those retail components. You might want them to be a residential, unit of some sort.
And along those
The
lines.
ideas of sort of making the exceptions, to me, is where we're getting sort of hung up. The language regarding exceptions seems to be our problem.
From that viewpoint, you would just stop the sentence, all permitted uses are limited to no more than 50% of gross floor area of the story. And so I took that what was here was that we were differentiating that certain could be more than 50% if we wanted, right?
I agree with what the reading is, but I'm now thinking about it across our districts that we have, these MXT districts that we have. Maybe we're not really crossing that issue by making the exception.
Can I,
By eliminating the exception, we're guaranteeing a sort of a mix.
before I answer that, I want to bring back to you a list of all the, thinking of the MXR1 and MXR2. I want to look at what those other uses other than residential are. There's only like 4 of them.
No,
Are
there's
you
a lot
looking
more
at the
than that.
table?
Yeah, there's surprisingly, there's a lot more that are sort of listed in there.
This was one of your attachments with your memo.
Because if you go down the use table into the MXT or the MX cars, you've got MXT could have a library, a museum, or cultural facility, a natural resource preservation, a religious assembly. You could have a minor utility or public service facility. This is an MXT. Veterinary care you could have in an MXT. You could have a personal improvement commercial service. You could have a research service, like a daycare, home or center. Then you get into restaurant, bar, microbrewery, winemaking facility. You have financial services, funeral or mortuary service, lodging, medical service. You could have an office. It says retail sales, commercial convenience goods, or consumer shopping goods. Even a trade school is a permitted use in an MXT. And the list is
comment
fairly
here,
extensive.
no, my comment is in the R district.
Oh,
It's very
yeah, the
limited.
R district's a different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies. And we're talking about a general building too, right? So you jump over into a row building, if you're in an NXT, then there's a different sort of stipulations about what happens on that ground floor. So now we're talking about a general building that's going to have, almost by default, is going to probably have some parking in that structure because it's recommended as part of, to pull parking under the building, right? I mean, that's sort of what the suggestion within 4.3 is, right? If there's any parking, prefer to be parking within the building, permitted fully in any basement and in rear of upper floors. So you're already chewing up space of that floor plan inherently in a general building. Which I think then speaks to your other comment about whether how parking is viewed, accessory to, is it part of the use or is it accessory use? Then how that gets interpreted really becomes the.
One interpretation I know Chicago started using was that when ground floor commercial uses are present, they don't consider the ground floor residential parking to be a residential use. But when there's no commercial on the ground floor, it is considered a residential use. And essentially, I mean, the reason that they do it is because most districts require a special use for residential on the ground floor. And therefore, if you have but a residential lobby is not considered a residential use because it has to be on the ground floor. So if you build a building with a lobby and ground floor parking for that building, then that's a residential use on the ground floor. But if you have commercial with residential parking as part of that ground floor, they don't consider that. You don't have to get a special use for that, essentially. So I don't know if there's a way to,
So they have a special use for residential because they want the first floor to be commercial?
in most districts, yes. Or some portion of it. They basically they don't want, generally speaking, they don't want residential units on the ground floor in most, non-residential districts. That's why they're special uses. I don't know that that's necessarily the way we want to go, but that's especially in MXT. I think we already do in the other districts, right? Let me look at the code. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, if you look at the table 4.2, the storefront building, which is first floor commercial only, is in the MX 1, 2, and 3 districts only.
Right.
Table 4.2.
Yeah, it's page 3 of the memo.
4.4.
Did I say it wrong? I'm sorry.
I'm on the code, so it's 4.4.2.
Yes. The tables don't track with the section numbers, yeah, which I think is a problem.
That's fine.
Maybe I should do that in the Scrivener's Errors. What do you think?
Got a potential clarifier question for Mr. Ross, if he's available. So, based upon your comments and then the reiterations of the emails that you provided to us, your concern isn't necessarily allowing commercial service, eating or drinking establishments or retail sales to take up more than 50% of a ground floor if the owner of the building would wish to. Your concern is that residential is not included in those exceptions. Is that fair?
If I'm understanding you correctly, yes. I don't think you should require 50% or more to be retail or restaurant. And again, maybe I'm confused by what's being proposed or changed, but that's what I thought was being proposed, is that right now, or proposed would be, you have to have at least half of the ground floor commercial services, eating, drinking establishments, and retail sales. Is that correct?
That's not how I'm reading.
No.
Okay.
So,
Answer the
so
question.
let me break this down. So the new language in quotes that Ellen has up on the screen.
Yep.
So all permitted uses are limited no more than 50%, except the following. The way that I'm understanding except, and then it goes on for 4 different types: commercial, eating and drinking, and retail sales. My interpretation of that language is that commercial, eating and drinking, and retail sales could occupy more than 50% if the owner wishes. You have no concern with that if the owner wishes, correct? For the ground floor?
Correct.
Your concern is that residential is not included within those exceptions.
Yes, and beyond that, it's limited to just 50%. So residential could not be more than 50%. That's what you're saying by it's not included in the exceptions.
It's not
It's
included.
limited to 50%.
Because
by
it is
that.
not included in the exceptions. It is currently limited to 50%.
To make it, yeah, that would be my concern, is that residential would have to be less than 50% of the ground floor. And again, let's use mine as an example. My parking garage would be considered, according to staff, a residential accessory use, and it takes up over 50%. And so my project would be out the door.
I'm following you.
And so would many others,
So
I feel, not just mine.
would your concern be alleviated if the term residential was included in commercial service, eating and drinking establishments, and retail sales?
Well, then I'd be fine with it, sure.
But then what are we limiting?
Right.
Say again?
What are we limiting in that case?
The other permitted uses that Eric just listed off
Yeah.
in the
Right.
permitted
But-
uses sections.
I think the question is here, the reason this is being brought up is, do you want a building with 100% residential on the ground floor in MXT?
Right, I understand that is the major
Okay.
concern. I'm saying
You're
there is a potential if we go that route, the language change is very simple to alleviate Mr. Ross's concern, if the commission agrees with that, if that's what we want MXT to look like. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying in my head, the quick language change would be very easy to make.
And what is that language change?
We simply include residential in the second
But
half of that
that
sentence.
doesn't alleviate the concern,
Yeah, it
because
doesn't.
that allows 100% residential on the ground floor.
That alleviates Mr. Ross's
Right.
concern that it does allow. it. I'm
Right.
saying that may not be what we want MXT to look like.
Right, that's true.
Can I suggest too, if you look at the Marquette project in Barrington on Route 59, it's a general building type in between commercial areas. The interesting thing about that is, let's not just limit ourselves to the prototype that Mr. Ross has presented to us. It's a big L-shaped building. The parking is underneath, but there are residential units on 3 sides of the building that you can enter. You know, that the apartments open up to 3 sides. So it's not just a strip with the front and the parking necessarily. That's not necessarily the type of building that you'll get. I just want to remind you of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's obviously a number of,
Different types of
different
general
building
building
types, right.
forms, yeah.
but, I mean, by the same, using all the same interpretations, assuming they weren't planned developments, they would also, like, they were not planned developments. That would mean that, you know, the ground floor at the Union and the ground floor at, I guess they're not MXT. Never mind. Scratch it, scratch it, scratch everything I just, keep it, but,
Let's bring back the map and think about this one. I think we're getting closer. I feel better that the discussion we're having about it this time is focusing more on the building type and not just the uses or specific district. But it's getting late, and I'd like to get through a few more things.
yeah, and, but we need to nail this down to move these on, correct?
Well, I'll bring it back in a red line version next time, because we're going to have to bring a few other things back.
Okay.
You know, because I want you to consider something in red line before you make a recommendation for approval to the board, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. You have to see how it really reads. But I don't know that we're ready on this one yet.
No,
I think we're understanding the problem better now.
Yeah, and I don't want to rush anything, but the stuff that we talked about 2 meetings ago is still waiting, because we need to get through all this.
We do have to go to at least one more hearing, though, to get into the accessory uses.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so,
any last thoughts for me, though? We also have what Eric suggested, that we just end with no more than 50%. That's another option out there.
But by ending at no more than 50%, we are disallowing commercial eating and drinking retail sales to take over more than 50%, which an owner may want to put a full ground floor restaurant in the annexed district.
right, particularly on a smaller site.
That would be a storefront building, though. That's the other. A storefront building. There's certain building types that the code calls out. General buildings, storefront buildings, row buildings, and civic buildings.
What if we just throw the word all permitted commercial uses are limited to no more than 50% of gross floor area, yada yada? Then we're talking just about commercial uses. Residential can be 100%. Problem solved. All right?
It
And
does
let's
give
move
you
on.
your horizontal mix.
And then let's move on.
Okay, I'll put it in the packet that way for next time. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads.
Can you say that again?
Yeah,
I will put
missed
it in the packet the way,
All permitted commercial uses are limited to no more than 50% of gross floor area of the story,
Of gross floor area?
except commercial services, eating, drinking, service, etc.
Commercial.
No,
I
no, no,
can't
no,
see
you,
it.
you don't need to go after, stop at story.
Mm-hmm. Stop at story.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
all permitted commercial uses are limited to no more than 50% of the gross floor area of the story. It's the first story.
I see what you're doing. Yeah, so that would in theory limit residential to not being the entire ground floor. And I guess it would be a question of, is 50%, if you're using a percentage, is 50% the number you want to use? So that's something to think about between now and the next meeting. But I know Ellen's got other things she wants to cover.
All right. That would allow the first floor to be all residential.
Correct. All right.
And one more clarification, do it for all three districts or break it out this way with a differential for the two residential districts?
I think some of it, we would need to see a map where some of it's located.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Does that make sense?
I'll work on that.
It does, Mike, but I think, like, as Ellen was alluding to earlier, I think those other uses outside of residential are significantly limited when you get to the MXR. And you're at a natural resource preservation,
Well, yeah.
you're at a minor public service or utility service, you're a daycare home, or a community garden.
An artisan industrial.
Artisan industrial, I missed that.
We got to speak up to the court.
Oh,
order to hear this.
and artisan industrial.
In an MXR,
MXR and MXT.
I believe that's home business.
Oh, cottage industry?
Yeah.
What is it?
Cottage
Cottage.
industry.
no, artisan industrial is not
There's a definition in 6 on that.
industrial. Justin, where are you seeing the artisan one?
So under public, civic, and institutional, under commercial, scroll down, past wholesale distribution and storage, go to industrial. It's that first row under the general tag of industrial.
Right, but the MXR is the last
Yeah.
purple shaded, which is not it's a prohibited use in MXR.
Is or is not a prohibited use?
It's it would be listed as a prohibited use in MXR.
It's in MXT, but not MXR.
Oh, I got you.
I'll put it in the packet both ways and you can decide next month. Okay?
Okay.
So this has been an intense project. There's all these sections that deal with accessory uses. Thank you, Craig. I'll make sure you know about the next meeting, okay? And these are all the sections I've been looking into. I've been pecking away at this project as time is permitted with all the other duties. And we've talked about some of this before, what accessory structures do and what we should consider when we're thinking about them. So here I'm getting into the accessory structures on the residential lots. That's what I'm moving into. And there are some limitations and regulations under the residential accessory structures. We've already had some consensus that we thought C should be upped from 140 to 200 square feet. And the height, I've got a proposal further down. I just put this in here as a reminder to help us talk. I don't need to talk through it right now, this slide. Another section related to garages. And this is where it gets confusing. It's all over the board in the code. So last month I'd given you a table. This is the newer improved version, and I did give you a printout on your desk. But what this proposes is, in a nutshell, that I'm looking for consensus on this evening, is that we would consider all accessory structures as structures. The code is ambiguous on building and structure, so we would clarify that they're all structures. Vasily and Danita and I did talk about whether garage and sheds should be buildings, but we think it works calling them a structure. And I'm going to go down the column by column. We've upped the size of the shed, the gazebo, and to 200 from the 140 in here. And the size is not pertinent to the other elements because they're all going to be subject to lot bulk regulations and maximum lot coverage. And then whether it'll count towards coverage, the third column is on the pergola and the deck, what the surface is underneath them. If it's impervious, then it'll count. But if you've got a deck that's raised and the water can percolate under, we won't count it towards lot coverage. If you've got an open air pergola and it's just grass underneath, not going to count it towards lot coverage. The whole question gets for lot coverage is whether or not the water is absorbing. What's the provosity of the site? The number allowed, we're saying one each for a garage, a shed, and a gazebo. And you'll see too, we clarified and differentiated on the gazebo if it's totally enclosed, so it is a little house all on its own, or if it's just a roof. Because it can have a roof on it and have no provosity underneath, you know, because it's grass. It can have total provosity underneath. So there's a differentiation there. I know previously you had talked about how tall the wall would be, this and that, and we just really felt whether it's enclosed or open walled is sufficient. And everything would be subject to setbacks. There is a special setback for swimming pools in the code. Right now, that's a footnote that the 5-foot setback includes the decking and the paved area, which makes sense because if you have a pool, you don't want it right up against a fence because the water will go into the neighbor's yard. A kid could jump a fence. You need space to get out of the pool. So that's why that was written that way, I believe. And then the distance to the principal structure and the distance to the garage is purely out of the building code. So what we're really asking you to have consensus on is this concept that you can have as many structures as you want as long as you meet the lot coverage. Now, and then I want to talk about the height of these structures. Some codes do limit accessory structures to a certain percentage of the lot itself so that it doesn't become a little Disneyland and everything's cluttered and there's this there and that in that corner. We weren't recommending we get into it that deeply. I do note currently 610.2F, the bottom of this slide, 6.10.2.F. The cumulative total coverage of all accessory structures, including garages, shall be added to the building area, the footprint of the principal structure for purposes of determining the maximum lot coverage, which shall not exceed 30%. Now, is that 30% a holdover remnant from before when you increased maximum lot coverage to 50 and 60? Or were we referring here that the accessory structures themselves can only cover 30% of the lot? I don't know. I think it's a holdover, and it just needs to, a holdover from prior to a recent code change. And I think you meant, you just missed that this should be increased to match the district. This is the current district regulation right now. You can see 50% lot coverage in the RS10, 60% in the RS 7.5, 60% in the RD 7.5, and 50 in the RM9. I think that that was just missed. That should have been upped from the 30, or did you mean that you wanted to limit accessory structures to 30%?
I think it's speaking to the, as it says, the cumulative total of it, all accessory structures. Which goes to your little Disneyland, analogy.
Did you say RMNI or something like that?
It's a district, it's a zoning district category name, and it's RM-9.
-9? And then
M
what is
is,
that?
M is in Mike. So it's R, so Romeo, Mike, Niner.
It's residential multifamily 9.
And then you mentioned somebody's name, somebody's name you were talking to, a woman?
Oh, this-
Danita, Danita, and Vasily, Vassili, are two of my coworkers. So Eric, you think it's the lot
Yeah,
coverage?
I think, yes, I see it as the aggregate combined of those accessory structures not wanting to be too big of a number. It's like a subset of the 60 is essentially what it is, or 50 at the RS10,
So,
which still seems very generous, thinking of it in those terms, like 30%. That means the principal structure could be 30%. If you sort of, but nobody's limiting the principal structure to 30%, I'm just saying.
Well, but that's the issue, because if you look at the text that's there, the cumulative, then it goes on to shall be added to the building, which is the building area of the principal structure, which shall not exceed 30% of the area of the lot. So we do have to clarify, though, that it's 30% on top. It's a maximum of 30% on top of the footprint of the principal structure.
That's why I took it as a remnant, because it was added to the house.
I'm agreeing with Ellen's interpretation.
But we could choose to limit the accessory structures if you would like.
I think that's a remnant from when maximum building lot coverage was 30%. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I gave you the Lombard, because many of our homes are similar to the Lombard built environment. And if you look on page 2, they limit 50%. Where did I just see that? All single-family residential lots must maintain a minimum of 50% open space, which is lawn, garden, or landscaped.
But they also limit no single accessory building to more than 10% of the lot area.
Right, they do the structure too, yeah. So I did start a table that I can bring back to you, where I've got a few communities, and I'm putting some of these questions in there. What I'm hearing is you might wish to limit the accessory structures. We just have to determine to what amount, or do you just want to leave it open like this table, as long as they meet lot coverage? Again, for me, the nexus is to the health, safety, moral welfare, which is the purpose of zoning, is that the lot coverage is to protect stormwater so it retains on the lot and doesn't flow over.
Right, but here's where it gets tricky. So if we say that swimming pools don't count towards lot coverage, if we say pervious decks don't count towards lot coverage, if we say pervious gazebos don't count towards lot coverage, and you can have up to 50% lot coverage, I mean,
You
In
could
re-
cut your grass with scissors.
yeah.
In reality, we have quite a few homes in the village that way already.
Well, yeah, that doesn't mean it's right, though.
Correct.
I like to back off my sort of the cumulative, because I think by the fact that we're establishing maximum areas for our sheds and our garages and these additional structures.
true.
We're already limiting a 700 square foot house and a 1,500 square foot garage in the back, right, kind of thing, where that's not gonna,
But we're
happen.
not limiting the number of structures,
No,
except for garages, currently.
correct.
But when you look at the structure, the only ones with roofs and walls are the garage, the shed, and the gazebos.
Correct.
So I guess the question on the table is, do we want to just leave it open-ended as long as you meet lot coverage? Or do we want to try and come to consensus on a maximum accessory structure coverage of the property?
I don't see it, the latter. I think it goes to 610-2F to be adjusted to to be aligned with the lot coverage established for the district, that whatever district it's in. Because it changes per district, right? There's 50, 60, there's 50 and 60, I believe. Ours 10.
Correct.
Right.
How much did the square footage go up on the sheds? Did it go up?
Proposing 60 from 140 to 200?
Actually, from 100.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah, it used to be 10 by, so it went up 100 square feet.
okay.
Yeah, because the 140, that may have been, I don't know if that was codified or not, but the 140 was a recent change, if it changed in the code.
When did it change?
I'm not
Well, see,
sure.
I've copied this straight out of the code here, the 610-2, and it's got 140 for the,
Yeah, that's one of the changes we just made with
it went from
Consuelo.
100 to 140
Yeah.
here. Okay.
And now we're proposing to go to 200?
Yeah.
Or
I
the
can back
suggestion?
it, I can back it down to
I'm just-
140
yeah.
if you want. The question is, I think we need to think of our residents and what's readily available for them to purchase. Most people are purchasing prefabbed sheds. It's very rare you get a stick-built shed anymore. But I'm open to your input on this.
I just would like to know when it was changed.
I'll have to
'cause
look
that
that
would
up for
really,
you.
you know,
The 140 change was in the last, since Consuelo was here, so in the last year and a half.
Do you remember President Kazone?
Hmm.
Okay. I have a stack this tall on my desk. I'll look.
That might, I mean, that could have been changed in the last 6 months. I mean, we spent so much time on those text amendments, I don't know which ones got passed when. But that was one of the ones that
When
Consuelo
you did the
recommended.
50-60%.
Yep.
Let me see what's in the current code. Yeah, 140 is currently online.
Yeah.
but
So
when? That's all I want to know.
when I can't give you a
Because
date.
Is there a
I was
zoning
told the wrong
ordinance?
information then,
Okay.
Less than 18, less
which
than 18.
really would aggravate me.
Is there a zoning ordinance?
Less than 18
This is
months.
the
It's not
online
no-
one.
oh my
This is
God.
online. Here, take it. You s-
Say less than 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So, Don,
Hold on.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, take a minute, we're good.
I'm trying to get down to see if it's got more than just, scroll down for me.
It was more than 3, less than 18.
Thank you. Go down to the bottom to see if there's two.
But we still are on camera, so.
Accessory structures, to see if there's two ordinance, there you go.
228.
Yeah. When you look at the code, you can see this section has more than just the 2018 code. It's got 2 amending ordinances, so I'll look at those and we'll be able to see when it happened. Okay?
So, Don, from your professional standpoint, are you seeing a lot of uses or requests for 200 square foot sheds?
Yeah, ours was kind of ridiculous at 100. Honestly, what can you put in a, you know, some people have riding lawnmowers, whatever, and like to keep their garage empty, but I was told 100 and that was it.
No, we're at 140.
Well, that's what this town is. Everybody just picks a number and goes. I mean, we don't have nothing standard around here. Oh, boy, here we go again.
So, Don, do you think it should be 200 for a shed?
It doesn't matter, because you guys are gonna just change it as you go anyway. I mean, that's the way, it seems everything works around. I'm sorry, I'm so aggravated with permitting and everything it's gotta change. It's getting better.
But we had
We
this
just gotta
conversation.
understand the codes around here. Being a contractor, I never, you never know.
February 28th.
We had that conversation about the 200 square feet, and I remember that's not a shed anymore, that's a garage. That's the size-
At 200?
Yeah, that's the size of a one-car garage.
That's true.
It's
A
not a
car
shed
is 10
anymore,
by
it's a
20 is a
garage.
parking space. Mhm. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I remember we had that conversation about the 200 square feet.
So I'm looking for direction from the commission. Keep it at 140 or go up to
We-
200.
Wait, hang on. There might be an error here.
He's reading the actual ordinance from.
Yeah, so- my-
Okay,
Okay.
so the ordinance that is referenced, for just to get this on the record, the ordinance that is referenced as the one of being the most updated is ordinance number 4275.
Is there a period in there?
No.
Ordinance number 4275, no period. That one is just regarding permitted uses, temporary uses, really goes to outdoor seating. And then I believe the storage containers, which we talked about. So that went into effect as of February 28th, 22. And the one prior to that, that is also referenced.
Yeah, but you're in 611, Justin.
Right, I'm trying to find the one that references 610.
Yeah, that's ordinance 4134, which has nothing of importance. Then the other is the 2018 update, the big monster, when we changed it all. And that had the 140 square footage language.
Right, but does 4134
No,
include the 140 language that we're talking about
it was
right
a
now?
minimal one that had it adjusted, reducing the distances between a detached garage and a principal structure from 10 to 5 feet. That's all that was doing in that particular.
I see. That's the one that you're referencing of February 10th, 2020?
Yeah. For that particular section, 610 too.
And then I believe that you referred to the other one of
Ordinance.
4036.
Correct.
Effective June 11th, 2018.
That's the big rewrite of the zoning.
Right.
code.
So what we're indicating is that although online it currently reads an allowance of 140 square feet for a shed, there's actually no referenced past ordinance that would provide the authority to increase to 140 square feet.
No, I'm saying ordinance 4036 has the language which shows it that the 610-2 language shows it to be 140 square foot on the limit. So in 2018, the
So it
area was increased.
it took effect on 2018.
The brand new ordinance included the increase from 100 to 140.
Or whatever it was prior to, assuming it was 100, yes.
So there's your answer, Don.
So 2018,
2018.
yeah.
Pardon?
June 11th, 2018 is when it adjusted to 140.
Oh, my God. It gets better and better.
So do you want to keep it at 140 or increase it?
Well,
It's your pleasure.
I guess the question comes to, and this was stuff that Vasily was sort of referencing before, when you start to get permits that are coming through that, homeowners are looking to put up a shed and they're getting a prefabricated sort of assembly. 140 sounds like it's a little thin and it's a little under compared to what people are trying to that are finding out in the market? Is that what the, is that the narrative that we're trying to?
I'd like to do some research or refer to the expertise of our commissioners.
I was just trying, I thought I remember Vasily sort of alluding to sort of, you know, structures coming in.
He did
Yeah.
reference prefab, yeah. I know
Yeah.
we looked at that specifically for the pergolas and the gazebos. I can't remember what we found when we looked for sheds.
Who's Vasily?
He's an engineer, Vassili. He's an engineer in our Public Works Department who does zoning reviews. What do you think, Don? Based on your
Oh,
experience, which is a better
I'll
number?
go back and do my homework.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. So I think I'm hearing consensus about sticking with the 50 and 60% maximum lot coverage, and then any amount that brings the house and the accessory structures within that. Is there consensus on that?
Do we have consensus on that?
I'm okay with it.
To remain within the applicable either 50 or 60%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, as noted in this table. There's consensus on, well, the gazebos we should look at also at the 200 again.
No.
Glenn,
Just the sheds.
just sheds? You're
Just
good with gazebos being bigger? Okay. Yeah, if you want to put a table and chairs in there, you want it a little bigger.
Correct.
So, Commissioner Jackson clarified that we'll consider if the sheds should be 140 or 200 square feet, but gazebos at 200 square feet is acceptable. Correct?
Fine. Yes. I say we need to. Oh, I'm getting tired. We need to look at what the prefab sheds come at, and we need to be at a square footage that is acceptable to get a prefab shed. Gazebos and decks are all, custom built, so we can work whatever we need to work with there. What are the current maximum areas for gazebos and decks? You said NA, not applicable for decks, but gazebos, you have 200, and currently we're at one something,
140.
140 and 140. I'm game for 200. Anybody else have an issue with that?
I don't, and you see, I just, a quick search through a big box retailer. You could get a 16 by 12, which goes up, which is 192 square feet, sort of modular size for both a shed and a gazebo. And that seems to be the topping out sort of size of some sort of a kit structure.
And point of clarification, the 140 foot was before us March of last year. Increased from 100 to 140. So if there's not an ordinance reference in the code, that's when it changed. I mean, it didn't necessarily change in March, but that's when it was before us.
So I'm fine with increasing the maximum areas of what we just talked about, 200, whether it be a shed, an open wall gazebo, a closed gazebo, and or pergola. I'm fine with it increased to 200. If there's a demand and the owner of the property wants it, that's fine. It's obviously, all those are going to be accounted against the total lot coverage of whether it be 50 or 60%. Jason, you brought this up, and I may likewise share this concern of why swimming pools are not counted against the total lot coverage.
I've seen it both ways, and it gets to, does it hold water and help the displacement of water across or not? Some people do it just because of the bulk on the lot, some communities, others include it for the bulk, and then others don't include it because they figure the purpose is stormwater, and it's helping your stormwater because it's retaining the water on site. It's a total, consider it total pervious, unless you get a, you know,
Pervious or impervious?
pervious. It holds all the water. It doesn't make it run off site. Similar to water percolating through the ground and not going off site, a pool holds all the water in the pool so it doesn't run off site.
And what happens when that pool is covered?
That's a reason to include it towards lot coverage. Yeah, it's whatever we want to do.
Most pool covers allow some water infiltration, otherwise they fill up and sink. Too, it is.
Ellen, since you're doing your homework, you guys changed the, what you're coming off your property lines to?
The setbacks, Danita gave me those from the building code. You think I need to confirm these, is what I'm just heard you say, huh?
Yeah, just for instance, you had a shed at 5.5.
No,
That's
it's a
a,
footnote of 5, but it's
it's a
5.
it's a superscript. And then in the shed it should be 5 with a superscript of 6, meaning code does not allow attached, does allow sheds to be attached to the garage with a, superscript 6 relating to a shed's distance to a detached garage. The code does allow a shed to be attached to a garage at a maximum size with architectural compatibility to the garage. That's supposed to be a superscript. It's not 5 foot 6 inches, it's 5 foot, footnote 6 in the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because that changed from 3 feet. You used to be able to keep it 3 feet. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
The garages and sheds used to be 3 feet in the
Right.
code. That went to 5 feet a while back. I think that was in '07 when Melissa Headley was here. I think I read that ordinance.
But our code more recently did allow them to have no setback if it was attached. You could attach a shed to a garage. That was permitted prior to this discussion. I don't know when we changed that,
But some garages, there's a discussion of garages, they were allowed to be 3 foot with the eaves 2 foot, so you were still off the property line. And in '07, I found the ordinance, it moved from the 3 to the 5. So, is that what you're referring to, the setbacks of garages and sheds from the lot lines?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the purpose is coming off 5 foot instead of 3
fire code.
So that
for a shed.
you're 5 on one side of a property and 5 on the other, you've got your 10-foot separation. This is how the code reads right now. If you look what's up on the screen, these are the setbacks. Interior side yard setback is actually 6, and then that's for buildings, and then the accessory structures are sprinkled throughout the code. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you got a combination of, eaves that are gonna be
Right,
closer,
right.
plus 3 feet, like, you start getting into maintenance issues and,
Okay. I've got a few more questions for you, and then I think we can wrap this up
Yeah.
for tonight. We had talked last time about height, and I was recommending we keep sheds at 10 and gazebos, 17 is what Lombard has, or the height of the principal structure, whichever is lower is how it reads. I don't know if you have any thought as an architect, Eric, on the heights of these accessory structures, but this seemed reasonable from what I've seen.
Yeah, those seem reasonable.
Let's talk about the principal structures, though. How tall is a 2-story house?
28,
36.
So
whatever. I
it's
mean,
the
whatever.
lower of,
But it's the lower of the number. It's not going to be a.
that's in case you had a house that was lower than 17 feet. The shed can't be, the gazebo can't be 17 with the house lower.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is what we had talked about last time, 17% or 75% of the height permitted in that district. I think we're better off at just saying 10 or 17, or the height of the building, whichever is lower. So as I thought about that one, I changed my recommendation to you. But at the top of this slide here, I broached to you, would you be open to a second garage structure on a lot that has an attached garage if it met lot coverage?
I'm not.
Is that can we do a roundtable, just up or down? Does anybody have any interest in second garage?
Is there enough acreage to accommodate that?
Well,
though?
that's it, if it met the lot
Yeah,
coverage.
so,
Yeah.
and
And on some of the
that
R,
would also require another driveway, correct?
yeah, and, well, that's why, and it would need, a paved driveway, and it would need to meet lot coverage, and it's possible on some of the RS10 lots.
So the majority of the lots, it's not even feasible, Jason. So in some of the bigger estate, as we joked around before, estate lots, it might be. And there may be a need for that.
It's possible to have your house, have your garage, and then build an attached garage onto the house with a side load also. So, that'd be part of the principal structure.
Yeah, if you've got a big enough lot, you could figure a way to detach more garage. That's the way I look at it.
But that's the question, do you even want to go down that road?
Personally, I don't, but
Can I have a show of hands? Anyone?
I don't think we have enough, I don't think we would have enough lots.
And
Yeah,
the
we
reason I
even
put it in here was
accommodated.
we had requests for it, so that didn't come out of the blue.
I mean, for the few, because I do see this as a few people would probably want to have two garages, they would be able to come to us via a variance request
Right.
to show the hardship.
and we've had that happen.
Right,
And
didn't we have one where it was an unpaved driveway and it was like kind of the second garage was kind of smack dab in the middle of the property lot, and they wanted to know they would have to put a full garage to get to the middle of their lot, kind of around the principal structure. Didn't that come to us within like the last year or so?
Something like that.
Or maybe if it didn't come as an actual petition, it came as a
Variance.
just a request to review and give feedback.
That was Consuelo's last meeting, I think,
Okay.
so. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm hearing no, leave it as a variance.
So, second garage, and
I'm not
Let's-
interested in the second.
I'd just like to
Yeah.
get everybody
I think we're
the
moving on
record
from
here.
second garages.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, so. Ed said he's not in favor of it.
I am not.
The majority are not in favor is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, because, I mean, I understand that we have a demand as a society, and I have way too much stuff of my own. But we have this demand of a society for more place to keep more stuff. Which is why we keep building, well, Lombard keeps building giant self-storage facilities right on the edge of Villa Park. But I don't know that backyards need to turn into self-storage.
Yeah, and they can build a shed now,
A
200 square
a
feet.
200
so let's move
square,
on.
a 200 square
I'm
foot
ready to move on.
shed, a 200 square foot shed, a 200 foot garage, or I mean gazebo, two garages, and then those garages either come with cars or stuff. And a lot of times people are building second garages because they don't have room in their first garage because it's full of stuff.
Yeah.
People come over to my house and they say, "You can park cars in your garage." Yep.
So the only reason I put this in here was just to show you I'm going to start to build this table out with the notes on the side. Nothing to discuss here. But these are the actual footnotes that go with those items in the current code. And I would then therefore ask for a motion to table discussion till the August, oh gosh, Pat, what is it? The August 14th meeting or 12th? You have to look that up.
Ellen, can you go back to the gazebo?
Yeah.
17 just seems,
Hi.
yes. Again, going back to a quick search through a online or big box retailer, right, to find at the maximum size of, let's say, a 16 by 12, which gets us right under that 200, these structures are showing a 10-foot sort of dimension.
I think it depends if you have a fan in there. Sometimes they're a little more,
Well, I'm saying
Overlook?
these ones, they're the ones that I'm finding. I mean, I'm not seeing ones that are 17 feet tall. So maybe we could come to a happy medium, and maybe it's 12,
Like,
right?
17
But
seems,
17 is
17 seems like that might be the gazebo on the prairie path.
completely, yes.
oh, a commercial gazebo, that might be where I picked that up. I think the Lombard one is 17
Eric, you
feet,
got
is
an
also
equal
where I
wall.
picked that up.
What's the pitch on that?
But
Maybe
it says-
just do a little,
it
yeah.
says it's 120
Do a little
to the
research and see
Well,
what you think, like,
The
typical-
Lombard one, no detached accessory structures shall exceed the height of the principal residence or.
Guys, we gotta keep it
17.
down a little bit, we still got a court reporter.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so the Lombard one was 17, so that's where I picked that up. And I saw prefabs at 16, so, but you're right, the commercial ones are gonna be higher. So do we wanna take it down to 12? I'm comfortable either way.
Leave it at 17 because if people are gonna buy a prefab, 16's where it's at.
That's not what she means by commercial, I don't think, though.
No, the gazebo on the prairie path is way bigger than 17 feet, isn't it?
I don't know.
I'm in civic space commercial, yeah, civic space like on the path.
Yeah.
You gotta
Those are
split up
tall.
commercial from residential.
Say that
There
again?
should be something for commercial, something for residential.
Well, this is all residential. This is all
I thought you
related to
meant
residential.
commercial too.
No, she
just
just-
brought it up. It just
Oh,
was
okay.
brought up.
That's where the number came from. It was a commercial gazebo. This is all related to residential accessory uses.
And maybe instead of commercial, I should say civic space gazebo
Yes.
would be taller. We have very few regulations for accessory structures in industrial. I'm going to introduce some of that into the table, like we saw in the Tinley Park example. So if you're ready to move on, we could entertain a motion to table the discussion till date certain, August 11th, 2022.
Is there a motion to continue the PZ 220006 to a date certain of August 11th, 2022? So moved. Got a motion from Shalinski, seconded by Hofstra. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that's continued.
Thank you, we're making progress.
All right, so I don't see anyone here wishing to speak on non-agenda items. Any updates or anything, Ellen? No?
No.
Where are we at with the gas station?
Casey's
Yes.
has a new project manager. We have received a few more of the items of their submittal, and it still remains, the best we know, that it's out to bid.
That what?
It is out to bid.
All right, any commissioners have comments? No? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.